What would you do if the one protecting your child wasn't human at all? When a venomous rattlesnake slithered into her backyard, Claire thought she had lost everything, until a wild bobcat did the unthinkable. This is a story of instinct, sacrifice, and a bond that defies every rule of nature. Stay with us to the end, because sometimes the wild doesn't take, it gives. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy the story, please like and follow. It helps us keep creating more. Your feedback means everything. Thank you. Sometimes the wild doesn't come clawing at your door. It sits quietly in your backyard, watching over you when no one else is looking. The late spring sun filtered gently through the tall pines of Willow Bend Reserve, casting golden patterns on the backyard of a modest house nestled at its edge. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that felt earned, not granted. Claire Bennett stood at her kitchen window, drying her hands, her gaze drifting to the scene outside. A soft breeze rustled the curtains. Her 2-year-old son, Eli, sat on a checkered blanket in the grass, babbling cheerfully to a wooden toy horse. His curls shimmered in the sun, chubby hands gripping the toy like it was treasure. A few feet away, stretched out in the dappled shade, lay Ronan, a bobcat whose very presence in their lives was still something Claire hadn't fully made peace with. Ronan's eyes were closed, but his tufted ears twitched at every bird call, every shifting leaf. His muscular frame, scarred but strong, rose and fell in a slow rhythm. He looked at rest. But Claire knew better. Ronan never fully slept, not with Eli around. He had been with them for nearly 6 months. Once a rescue case, half-starved, paw mangled in an illegal snare. Ronan had been given a second chance under Claire's care. The damage to his leg had rendered him unreleasable, and with the proper permits, he had become her responsibility. At first, she kept him in a reinforced outdoor enclosure, but over time, supervised visits to the backyard became part of their routine, and strangely, Ronan had respected every rule, never pushing boundaries, never showing signs of aggression. Still, he was a predator, and Eli was small. Claire never let them interact directly. She had drawn that line firmly, but the line blurred when she noticed Ronan's behavior shifting, not toward Eli, but around him. He would always place himself within viewing distance, always watch, always wait. Her mother, Irene, had been vocal in her concern. "You're raising a child with a wild animal 20 feet away," she'd said last week over the phone. "It's not a fairy tale, Claire. That thing isn't family." Claire hadn't argued. She didn't have the words to explain the balance they'd found. That afternoon, the air carried the scent of pine and cut grass. Claire glanced again at the clock, just enough time to grab the laundry before it cooled. Eli was absorbed in play. Ronan, dozing. "Just 60 seconds, she whispered to herself. The laundry room was only a few steps down the hall. She moved quickly, folding still warm towels into the basket, her mind already drifting to dinner plans. Maybe pasta tonight, the kind Eli liked. Then came the sound. Low, guttural, unmistakable. Not a growl. A warning. Claire froze, towels forgotten. She bolted back to the kitchen and slammed open the back door. Eli was gone from the blanket. Ronan had him. Her heart seized until her brain caught up. Ronan had Eli by the back of his overalls, not his body. He was dragging the child across the lawn, swiftly but carefully. His head low, eyes locked behind them. And then Claire saw it. A rattlesnake, thick and coiled, lay exactly where Eli had been playing. Its rattle buzzed angrily, body tense, ready to strike again. Ronan reached the porch and released Eli, who tumbled backward, startled but unharmed. Then the bobcat staggered, his right front leg collapsing under him. A dark bloom of blood spread across his fur. Claire's knees buckled as she ran forward. He had taken the bite. Not Eli, Ronan. Sometimes the one you thought needed saving turns out to be your greatest protector. Claire's hands trembled as she loaded Ronan into the transport crate. He didn't resist, which frightened her more than if he had. His body was heavy and limp, his breathing shallow, and his golden eyes, once bright and alert, had dulled to a half-lidded haze. She secured the latch with one hand and scooped Eli into the other, kissing the boy's curls while trying to steady her voice. "It's okay. It's going to be okay." The drive to the wildlife emergency clinic was 42 minutes, but today it might as well have been eternity. Claire strapped Eli into his car seat and wedged the crate beside her in the front so she could glance over every few seconds. Ronan's breath came in uneven bursts. The leg where the snake had struck was swelling quickly. Claire gripped the steering wheel tight, her jaw clenched as tears gathered in her eyes. "Just hold on," she whispered. "Don't you give up on me now." She remembered the first day she'd seen him at the rehab center, mangled, near death, barely more than fur and bones. He had fought to survive then. He had to do it again now. The clinic came into view. A squat, gray building tucked behind a line of tall cedars. As she skidded into the lot, the front door flew open. Dr. Ravi Patel, tall and calm under pressure, was already rolling out a gurney. Claire jumped out, nearly stumbling as she opened the crate. "He's been bitten. Front right leg. I saw the snake. Rattler." Dr. Patel didn't ask anything else. "Let's get him inside." Claire followed, clutching Eli close as the doors swung shut behind them. Inside, Angela, the young assistant, had already prepared the IV station. Everything moved fast, precise. Ronan was sedated, fluids started, and antivenom drawn up. "How long ago was the bite?" Dr. Patel asked, checking Ronan's gums. "Maybe 15 minutes, Claire replied, her voice breaking. "He saved my son." Dr. Patel's hands didn't stop moving. "That's not something you see every day." "No," Claire whispered, rocking Eli gently. "It's not." Ronan's breathing grew more erratic for a moment, then evened out as the antivenom entered his bloodstream. Angela marked the time and adjusted the drip. Claire's mind spun. She had spent years training others not to anthropomorphize wild animals. They are not pets. They are not human. Don't assign them emotions they don't possess. She'd said that 100 times, and yet, Ronan had acted with intention. He had pulled Eli from danger, not run from it. He had placed himself in harm's way. Her gaze drifted to the crate's glass panel, where Eli now stood, his small hand pressed against it. "Row," he whispered. Claire turned toward Dr. Patel. "Will he make it?" Dr. Patel looked up from the monitor. "The next 12 hours are critical. We've stopped the venom spread, but his body needs time to fight the damage. He's strong. That helps." Claire nodded, swallowing hard. "Can I stay?" "Of course." She laid Eli down on a cot in the corner. The child fell asleep almost immediately, worn out by the chaos. Claire sat beside Ronan's crate, watching the steady rise and fall of his flank. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Dr. Patel adjusted the IV, checked vitals. Once, Ronan stirred, his ears twitching faintly, as if registering Claire's voice when she whispered, "Thank you." By 9 p.m., Dr. Patel returned with a small smile. He's stabilized, blood pressure's holding. He's not out of the woods, but this is promising. Claire exhaled for the first time all evening. The tension in her body released like a wave crashing down. Back at home later that night, the backyard looked unchanged, but Claire knew it wasn't. Nothing would ever be the same. Not after today. Not every wild creature flees danger. Some choose to stand guard, even when no one asks them to. The morning after the bite dawned clear and quiet. Dew sparkled across the grass of Willow Bend, the birds unaware that something extraordinary had happened beneath their trees just hours earlier. Claire stood at the kitchen counter, staring at her cold coffee. Her phone lay nearby, screen dark, waiting for another update. Eli napped upstairs, lulled by the weight of yesterday's chaos. And Ronan was still at the clinic, fighting a venom that should never have touched him. A wild creature, Claire reminded herself. He shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have had to choose. But he had. A chime from her phone made her heart skip. It was Dr. Patel. Text message. Ronan awake. Alert. Swelling has begun to recede. Eating soft food. We're keeping him until afternoon for observation. Looking good. Claire let out a breath, tears welling behind her eyes. Relief came in sudden, aching waves. She whispered, "Thank you." Though she wasn't sure if it was meant for the vet, the universe, or the silent Bobcat lying in a recovery pen. That afternoon, her mother arrived. Margaret Grant, trim and composed as always, stepped from her blue SUV with a tote bag and a look of mild disapproval. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, pulling Claire into a brief, bracing hug. "I haven't." Margaret followed her inside, setting the bag down on the kitchen table. "Now, tell me everything, and don't downplay it. I read your email, and it was far too calm for what you described." So Claire told her. The rattlesnake. The warning call. Ronan dragging Eli to safety. The bite. Margaret sat in silence for a long time afterward, fingers laced in her lap. Her eyes kept drifting toward the window, toward the patch of grass where the drama had unfolded. "He really saved Eli," she said finally, quietly. Claire nodded. "He didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second." Margaret leaned back, sighing. "I've always thought you were half mad for keeping him around. Dangerous. Irresponsible." Her voice softened. "But I never imagined that." Neither had Claire. Later that evening, after Margaret had taken Eli upstairs for a nap, Claire pulled into the gravel lot of the clinic. The trees swayed gently overhead. Inside, Angela greeted her with a tired but genuine smile. "He's ready to go home." Dr. Patel stood beside the recovery enclosure. Ronan was awake, lying down but alert, his gaze tracking Claire as she entered. "He's healing well," Dr. Patel said, opening the kennel door. "Still favoring that leg, but no signs of necrosis. We'll continue oral antibiotics, twice a day." Claire crouched beside the kennel. Ronan didn't flinch. He just blinked at her, slow, heavy, like he knew she needed reassurance. "Hey, you," she whispered. "You scared the hell out of me." Dr. Patel watched them for a moment. "You know, most wild animals avoid trouble." He ran toward it. "That's not just instinct." "I know," Claire said. She signed the release forms and gently loaded Ronan back into the carrier, then into the car. At home, Eli squealed the moment he saw him. "Row! Row back!" Claire smiled, blinking fast. "Yes, buddy. He's back." She set the carrier down and opened the door. Ronan stepped out cautiously, limping but steady. He moved across the room, then paused, not at the window or the kitchen, but a few feet from Eli's playpen. He lay down slowly, watching, quiet, and somehow more present than ever. Some memories are not stored in the mind. They settle in the quiet places behind the eyes, where trust is born. The days that followed were quiet, gentle, filled with routines that felt almost sacred in their ordinariness. Claire woke early each morning, often finding Ronan already awake, stretched near the back patio door, eyes blinking into the morning sun. His limp had improved, though he still favored his injured leg. The fur around the bite wound had been shaved to allow the skin to breathe, leaving a small pink patch, a permanent reminder of the price he'd paid. Eli seemed unchanged, as if the events of that afternoon hadn't fully registered in his young mind. But Claire noticed small things, how his eyes often searched for Ronan the moment he stepped into the yard, how he giggled louder when the Bobcat was near, how he babbled the name Roe with a quiet sense of certainty. Margaret stayed an extra day. It wasn't typical. Her visits were usually brief, her schedule too structured to allow for lingering. But something had shifted. She offered to help in the garden. She made tea without being asked. Once, Claire caught her watching Ronan from the window, not warily, but thoughtfully. "You know," Margaret said one afternoon, sipping her tea, "when I was a girl, there were old stories about animals like him." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You mean bobcats?" "No, not just bobcats. Guardians. The kind that weren't fully wild, not quite tame either, something in between. My grandfather used to say they were spirits in fur. Chose who to protect. Didn't ask permission." Claire smiled faintly. "Sounds poetic." Margaret nodded. It was. Later that evening, after Margaret had returned to her guest room, Claire sat on the porch with a book in hand. Eli played nearby, dropping plastic rings into a bucket, content in his toddler world. Ronan lay nearby, no longer in the shadows, but just a few feet away, in plain view. His posture was relaxed but watchful, eyes half-lidded, tail flicking lazily. The golden hour painted the trees in amber and fire. Somewhere in the forest, a raven called out. Claire didn't read. She watched. Watched her son. Watched the wild creature who had changed everything. Suddenly, Eli stopped playing. He stood up, clutching a ring in one hand, and waddled toward Ronan. Claire tensed. But Eli stopped a respectful distance away, as if guided by some unspoken understanding. He lifted the ring, small, blue, worn with use, and held it out in offering. "Ro," he said softly, "you can have." Ronan didn't move. He didn't sniff, or shift, or rise. But his eyes, those wild, deep-set eyes, blinked slowly. Once. Then again. And Claire knew. That gesture, that simple, deliberate blink, was his answer. Not yes. Not no. But, "I see you, I remember you." She felt her throat tighten. She wanted to capture that moment in amber, wanted to wrap it in cloth and place it somewhere sacred. But she knew, instinctively, that it was not a moment to be grasped. It had to live in the space it had been born, soft, quiet, unquestioned. That night, as she tucked Eli into bed, Claire leaned close and whispered, "You're safe." She turned off the light and stepped onto the back deck. The moon had risen, silver and still. Ronan sat at the edge of the yard, facing the trees, not sleeping, not wandering, watching, still guarding, still choosing. Not all wild things run. Some remain, not because they are tamed, but because they choose to belong. Summer deepened across Willow Bend. The days grew long and slow, cicadas hummed in the trees, and Claire found herself falling into a rhythm that, strangely, felt like peace. Ronan had healed. The bite wound had left a faint scar beneath his fur, but he walked without a limp now, his movements once again fluid and silent, like shadows passing through water. Yet something had changed, not in his body, but in his presence. He was closer, always just near enough. When Claire gardened, he lay a few yards away, eyes closed but ears alert. When Eli played in his sandbox, Ronan circled the fence line like a quiet perimeter. He never approached. He never asked. He simply was. And Claire, once hesitant, had stopped watching him with caution. She no longer reminded herself to be careful. The boundaries were still respected, unspoken, understood. But trust had replaced tension. One evening in late July, the community center invited Claire to speak at a wildlife awareness event. It was a small gathering, mostly local families, a few park rangers, and curious townsfolk. She stood beside a photo slideshow, images of animal rescues, habitat maps, educational programs. But when she got to the final story, the room fell utterly still. She told them about the rattlesnake. She told them about the 60 seconds that nearly shattered her life, and the bobcat who didn't run. "He's not my pet," Claire said softly, her voice echoing in the quiet hall. "He's not domesticated. He's wild, and that's exactly why what he did matters." A hand rose in the back. A boy, maybe 10 years old, asked, "Do you think he loves you?" Claire paused. Then she smiled. "I don't know if wild animals feel love the way we define it, but I know this. He chose us, when he didn't have to." After the talk, a park ranger approached her. He was older, grizzled, with eyes that had seen too much forest and too many lines crossed. "You ever think," he said, "that maybe the ones who survive the worst of humanity end up carrying the most humanity inside them?" Claire nodded. "Yes, I think about that every day." That night, as she pulled into her driveway, she saw Eli asleep in his car seat, cheeks flushed from the excitement. And beyond the porch light, just past the garden, sat Ronan, waiting. Not watching for danger, not pacing, just there. A part of the home, a part of them. She carried Eli to bed, kissed his forehead, and returned to the porch. The night air was cool. Stars glittered above like a scattered trail home. She sat on the steps, arms resting on her knees. Ronan padded over silently and settled a few feet away, tail curled neatly around his paws. For a while, they sat in stillness. Then Claire whispered, "You could have disappeared after you healed, slipped back into the wild, but you stayed." Ronan didn't move. She added, almost to herself, "I think that's the bravest thing of all." From inside, Eli stirred in his crib. A small voice drifted through the open window. "Ro." Ronan's ears flicked once. Claire smiled. In the world's eyes, she was a wildlife biologist, a single mother, a woman who had broken protocol by bringing the wild too close. But here, in this small sanctuary between forest and fence line, she was something else entirely. Chosen, not by the wild she had saved, but by the wild that had chosen to stay.